I found the group chat on a Sunday afternoon in October. Not by snooping, not by going through anyone's phone or accessing anything I was not supposed to access. I found it the way things reveal themselves when someone makes a careless mistake. My mother-in-law had left her phone on the kitchen counter while she was in the bathroom, and a notification came through while I was standing right there, and I looked at it the way any person looks at a notification on a screen that is in their line of sight. The notification was a message in a group chat. The group chat was called Family, which I understood because they were a family with group chats the way all families are now. What I did not understand for the first half second was why I was not in it. I knew their family group chat. I was in their family group chat. This was a different one. The message that had come through was from my sister-in-law, Vanessa. It said, "She made the green bean thing again, lol. The performing seal never disappoints." I stood at the kitchen counter for a moment. Then I picked up the phone. I want to be precise about this decision because I have thought about it many times since. I picked up the phone because what I had just read was information that I deserved to have. Not information I had sought, not information I had gone looking for, but information that had arrived in front of me and that I was not going to pretend I had not seen. I looked at the notification preview. Then I opened the phone. It was not locked, which told me something about how careful they had been about this, and I opened the chat. I stood at my mother-in-law's kitchen counter for 4 minutes. 4 minutes was all I needed. The group chat had been running for 6 years. I want to say that again because I think it needs to be said plainly. 6 years. For 6 of the 10 years I had spent trying to be exactly the right kind of daughter-in-law, there had been a separate group chat containing my husband's mother, Patricia, his sister, Vanessa, his brother, Colin, Colin's wife, Stephanie, and 2 aunts, in which I was the primary subject of entertainment. Not the only subject. There were other things in the chat: family logistics, shared photographs, ordinary family communication, but I was a recurring feature. The performing seal was what they called me, which I had to read 3 times before I believed it. It was not a new nickname. It appeared across years of messages, casually, the way you use a nickname that has become so embedded in a group's language that no one thinks about it anymore. The performing seal. Because I performed, because I showed up to every family event with something homemade and remembered everyone's dietary restrictions and sent birthday messages to cousins I had met twice, because I tried, consistently and without acknowledgement, to be the person that someone who loved their family would want to join it. They had found this funny. For 6 years they had found it funny. I put the phone down exactly where I had found it. I went to the bathroom, and I looked at myself in the mirror for a long moment. Then I washed my hands. I had been washing my hands when I walked past the counter. That was why I was in the kitchen. I had been washing my hands before Sunday dinner. And I went back to the dining room, and I sat down at the table that I had helped Patricia set, in the house that I had helped Patricia clean that morning, and I waited for everyone to come to the table. My husband, James, sat down beside me. He said, "You okay? You look pale." I said, "I'm fine, just a headache." He said, "I'll get you something." I said, "I'm fine."
I need to tell you about the 10 years, because the 10 years are the point. I had married James at 28. He was the second of 3 children, the one the family described as the steady one, reliable, uncomplicated, the one who would always be there. His mother, Patricia, had raised them largely on her own after his father left when James was 14, which had produced in her a fierce, capable woman with a strong sense of her family as her domain and a particular way of assessing the people who entered it. I had understood from the first meeting that Patricia's assessment would matter and that it would not be given quickly. She was not unfriendly. She was warm, even, in the careful way of a woman who is warm by choice rather than by default. But there was always an evaluation behind the warmth, a quality of watching. I had decided to be worth watching. I had decided, in the particular way of someone who has grown up understanding that belonging requires effort, to be excellent at being in this family. Not to perform, and here is the painful irony of the nickname, the thing that has cut deepest, but to genuinely try. The green bean casserole I brought every Sunday was not a performance. It was the dish Patricia had mentioned once, in passing, that reminded her of her own mother. I had written it down and made it the next week and brought it because I thought it would mean something to her. The appointments I drove her to, 3 months of Tuesdays during her treatment 2 years ago, were not performance. They were what I would have done for my own mother extended to hers, because I had believed she was mine now too. The birthdays and the allergies and the preferences, all of it, every bit of it, was real, was genuine, was 10 years of someone trying to love a family into loving her back. And for 6 of those years, in a group chat I was not in, they had been calling me the performing seal. Sunday dinner was pasta, Patricia's recipe, which I had asked her to teach me the first year James and I were together, which she had taught me with the specific proprietary pleasure of a woman passing something down. I had made it many times since. I made it well. I had been told so, by Patricia herself, by Vanessa, by all of them. I sat at the table and I ate the pasta, and I listened to the conversation move around me the way family conversation does, the inside references, the callbacks to shared history, the particular language of people who have known each other all their lives, and I watched them. I had sat at this table for 10 years. I knew this table. I knew the way the light came through the window at this hour, and the way Colin always took too much bread, and the way Patricia held her fork. I knew all of them with the specific, accumulated knowledge of someone who has been paying close attention for a decade. None of them knew what I knew. The performing seal never disappoints. I ate the pasta, I helped clear the plates, I washed up because I always washed up, standing at Patricia's sink with my hands in the hot water, and Vanessa came in at some point and stood beside me drying, and said something about a television show, and I said something back, and she laughed, and I smiled. She did not know that I knew. None of them knew that I knew. I drove home with James in the particular Sunday evening quiet of a couple who have been together long enough that they do not need to fill every silence. He put his hand on my knee at a red light. I looked out the window. He said, "Good day?" I said, "Fine." I did not tell James that night, or the night after, or the rest of that week. I want to explain what I did instead, because I think it matters more than the confrontation that eventually came. I thought for a full week with the specific, unhurried thoroughness that I applied to things that mattered, about what I had read and what it meant and what I wanted to do with it. Not in the obsessive way of someone who cannot stop replaying an injury. I had done what I could with that in the first 48 hours, had felt the full weight of 6 years of a nickname I had not known about, and had given myself the time to feel it, but deliberately, trying to understand what was true and what I wanted to be true, and what I was going to do about the gap between them. What I concluded at the end of that week was this. The group chat told me something I had not known about my husband's family. It did not tell me everything about my husband. James was not in the chat. I had checked in those 4 minutes at Patricia's counter. His name was not there. His messages were not there. He had not participated in 6 years of the performing seal jokes. This mattered to me. I want to be honest that it mattered, because it determined what happened next. I called my sister, who had always been the person I called when I needed to think out loud about something I could not yet say to anyone involved. I told her what I had found. She listened without interrupting. When she finished, she said, "What do you want?" I said, "I want them to know that I know. I want James to know. I want there to be a moment where the thing that has been true in private has to be true in public." She said, "When?" I said, "I'm going to wait until the moment when it costs them the most." The moment came, 3 weeks later. Patricia's 70th birthday.
A large celebration. Vanessa had been planning it for months. A dinner at a restaurant, 40 people, the full extended family. I had been involved in the planning, as I was in all family things, because I was the one who showed up and helped and remembered what needed to be remembered. I had booked the restaurant. I want to say that clearly. I had made the reservation at a restaurant that required a reservation 6 weeks in advance, and that Vanessa had been unable to secure and had asked me to try, because, as she had said, "You're so good at these things." I had called in a favor from someone I knew and had secured the reservation and the menu and the dietary accommodations for 40 people. The performing seal. I drove to the restaurant with James on the evening of the dinner. I wore the dark blue dress I had bought for the occasion. I was calm in the specific way I had been calm since the Sunday afternoon in October, not the performed calm of someone managing their emotions, but the genuine calm of someone who has made a decision and is at peace with it. We arrived, 40 people over the course of an hour. The table was exactly what Vanessa had wanted. The menu was exactly right. Patricia was delighted. Genuinely, visibly, the uncomplicated delight of a woman's 70th birthday had become a beautiful evening that someone had cared enough to make beautiful. Vanessa found me before dinner and said, "This is perfect. You did such a good job." I said, "Thank you, Vanessa." She squeezed my arm and went to find her husband. I went to find James.
I had told James the previous evening. I want to be precise about this. I had not hidden it from him for 3 weeks out of strategy. I had been working out what I needed to understand before I said anything to him, and I had understood by the evening before the dinner that I needed to tell him before the dinner because what happened at the dinner was going to be something he deserved to know was coming. I told him at our kitchen table. I told him what I had seen on Patricia's phone and what was in the chat and what they had called me for 6 years. I told him calmly, in order, the way I told difficult things. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I didn't know." I said, "I know you didn't." He said, "Claire." I said, "I believe you. That's why I'm telling you before tomorrow instead of after." He looked at me. I said, "Tomorrow, I'm going to tell them that I know. I'm not going to make a scene. I'm not going to ruin your mother's birthday, but I am going to say it clearly to the people who need to hear it, and I wanted you to know it was coming." He was quiet again. Then he said, "What do you need from me?" I thought about that question, about what it meant that he had asked it rather than asked me not to do it. I said, "Just be there." He said, "I'll be there." The moment came after dinner. After the main course, after the cake, after the speeches, Vanessa's speech, Colin's speech, the aunt who always talked too long, after Patricia had opened cards and been photographed and been told by 40 people how loved she was, after all of it, in the natural lull when the evening was winding down and people were finishing their wine and the restaurant noise had settled into something quieter, I stood up. Not dramatically, I did not tap a glass or call for attention, I simply stood, and the noticing spread around the table the way it does. Patricia looked at me with the warm, expectant expression of someone who thinks they are about to receive one more birthday tribute. I said, "I want to say something. I'll be brief." I looked around the table, 40 people, the family I had spent 10 years trying to belong to. Patricia and Vanessa and Colin and Stephanie and the aunts and the cousins and James, beside me, who was looking at the table. I said, 3 weeks ago, I found out about the group chat, the one called Family that I'm not in. I've known for 3 weeks, and I've thought very carefully about what I wanted to say and when I wanted to say it. The table was very still. I said, "I've been coming to this table for 10 years. I've cooked and cleaned and driven Patricia to appointments and remembered everyone's birthdays and allergies and preferences because I believed this was my family, and that's what you do for your family." I looked at Vanessa. I said, "The performing seal. That's what you've called me, for 6 years." The stillness was complete. I said, "I'm not going to tell you what to feel about that. I'm going to tell you what I've decided. I love James. I am going to stay married to James because James is not in that chat and James has been beside me tonight in the way that matters. But I am done performing for an audience that has been laughing at the performance." I picked up my wine glass. I said, "Happy birthday, Patricia. The restaurant was lovely." Then I sat down.
Nobody said anything for a long moment. Then Patricia said my name, in a voice I had not heard from her before. I looked at her. She said, I don't. She stopped. "I'm ashamed." I said, "I know." She said, "It was never." She stopped again. "It started as a joke, the way things do, and then it just." She shook her head. I said, "I know how things like that start." James' hand found mine under the table. Vanessa said, "Claire, I said, "Not tonight, Vanessa, not tonight." The dinner ended, people left. James and I drove home in the specific quiet of two people who have just been through something and who do not yet need to talk about it. At home, he made tea. We sat at our kitchen table. He said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Ask me in a week." He said, "Okay." He sat with me while I drank the tea. He did not try to explain or excuse or manage. He sat there, which was what I had asked for, and it was exactly right. Things are different now. I will not tell you they are resolved because some things take longer to resolve than a story has room for. What I will tell you is what is true. I still go to family dinners. Not every Sunday. I have renegotiated that, quietly, without drama. But sometimes. James comes to mine now, equally, which had not been the pattern before. Vanessa apologized. In a letter which surprised me, I had expected a text, the modern person's apology, but she wrote a letter that was 3 pages and that was, I think, as honest as she could manage. I read it. I put it in a drawer. I have not decided yet what to do with it. Patricia does not call me the performing seal anymore. I know this not because I have seen the chat, I have not looked at it again and do not intend to do so, but because James told me, quietly, that the chat was gone. I make the green bean casserole when I want to, not every Sunday, when I want to, because I like it and because it was never performance. It was always just me, trying to love people who were not yet ready to be loved that way. That is the thing I have had to sit with, that the trying was real, that 10 years of genuine effort does not become false retroactively because the people receiving it were not receiving it the way I intended. What I gave was real. What they did with it was theirs. I gave it anyway. I would give it again, not to perform for an audience, but because that is who I am, and a group chat I was not in does not change who I am. She doesn't stay silent. She doesn't stay broken. She rises. Sometimes rising is standing up at a birthday dinner after the speeches and the cake and saying clearly, without anger, without a scene, "I know, and I'm done." Sometimes the most powerful sentence available to you is simply, "I know." Subscribe. New story every week, and every single one of them ends the same way. She rises. Leave a comment. Have you ever found out that people you loved were not who you thought they were? Tell me. I read every single one.